I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I came across this term, which I don't know. I'm just checking if you know, software supply chain security. What does that tell to you?
Well, not that I looked this up or anything, but if you were to ask me what does software supply chain security mean to me, I would think of the security of the software running transportation and logistics systems that are part of supply chain management, just off the tip of my tongue.
It's a good definition. I don't know if it's the right definition, though, because I wouldn't be able to define that either. But we have Simon Maple and Per Olsen joining from Snyk and Visma, respectively. And where last year we had a speech about overcoming security issues using DevOps mindset, now we have Simon and Per talking about how security practices have changed as a result of Agile development and DevOps pipelines. And they talk about how teams should adapt new security practices to take responsibility for security. So let's give floor to Simon and Per.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here at the DevOps Conference, and thank you very much to Eficode as well for hosting. My name's Simon Maple. I'm the field CTO at Snyk, and joining me today for this session is my friend Per Olsen from Visma. Per, how are you doing?
Thank you, Simon. Yes, I'm fine, thanks. So yeah, I work here at Visma as a security advisor, and I have a developer background myself. And today I work in the security team, where we try to create a good environment for developers and employees to work with security and take good security decisions. And together with Simon, we will be sharing some of the experiences from running a security program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I work at Snyk, which is a vendor, a tool that's actually sponsoring the conference as well, that aims to provide a developer security platform. So look forward to sharing some examples of how and why developer adoption is important and how many achieve it, including examples directly from Per with Visma. I've also done an amount of research on this topic as well, speaking with a number of our customers and a number of people in the community about how they achieve developer adoption and why it's important to them. And we'll be sharing some of those as we go. So why don't we jump in and see what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to start off with why developer adoption is important. And I think a lot of people will recognize why developer adoption is important generally, particularly with the DevOps background. But we'll be talking about it quite specifically here with security as well. Then one of the core pieces about understanding your development teams and having that empathy for development teams, and then how you can empower your developers to adopt that security practices, new security processes, and be secure in their continual development. So, without further ado, let's jump in. And first of all, we're gonna tackle this question of why developer adoption is important for those who are still unaware. So we've seen a shift across how applications are really constructed. Previously, number of years ago, and my background is around 20 years in engineering teams as well. So, when I started, we were really developing code in our IDE. We were using third-party libraries and building that, and then kind of throwing it over a wall to an ops team to put that into a production environment. These days, we see a lot more of that infrastructure, a lot more of the containers and that kind of work in Git repos being handled by developers and so forth. So what that means is developers are either entirely owning, but more likely kind of part owning, part maintaining, and certainly interacting with those different files and infrastructure as code really in the environment. And what this leads to is the need for a different solution, first of all. Whereas previously, if a developer wanted to, change a network setting or open a port up or something, they would raise an IT ticket and have an IT security solution that would test those changes. What we now need is an application security solution to run within the pipeline. And of course, the pipeline has changed. We've moved more from a waterfall to a DevOps model, which is great. But as a result, the ownership of security needs to change as well. And what we mean by this is more than a shift left motion. It's more than moving something, a number of weeks, months, days to the left and just doing it earlier. It's about an ownership change where you move it from the auditing process from a security team down to a developer. And that's a really core change because developers need different information from their tooling, from their teams, from others, and they need to perform different actions, as we'll talk about later. But this ownership change is key. And Per, at Visma and in your experience, you've presumably seen these kind of ownership changes. You've seen these shifts. In your opinion, why is developer adoption core at Visma?
I mean, it's not only the security team that does the security. Actually, it is not the security team that does the security, which might sound kind of like counterproductive, but it is actually the employees that do code changes. They are the one that fixes security issues. So, I mean, we really, really need their support. Without them, the security team wouldn't even exist. So having the developer support, but also management support is really, really crucial to run a smooth security program.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the way things have changed, so for example, have you been able to just retrofit what you were doing previously in more traditional security teams over to the developers, or the way that the developers have needed to interact and change their processes? Has that been a big factor as well?
Yes, indeed. I see this more as a cultural problem. So it is not just here you have a tool and use it, but you have to constantly remind the developers. And this is not only for security. This is goes for the entire DevOps situation. You have to always keep reminding that we are responsible for the full picture and not only for features or only for support or only for performance. You own the entire platform, the full experience to the end users.
And your role in a kind of security team now actually changes from one that was maybe seen as developers at some point as almost like a blocking function or something which is there to stop developers from pushing code, to actually one where you're supporting them. So they're running the tests, exactly. They're trying to fix, and where they need help, you step in and help them. So
exactly.
Actually quite similar to just...
Yeah, I mean, we're more like facilitators, trying to help them to work with security as easy as possible. If they have security issues, whether that is on a code level, well, we have some experts on that. If it is management issues, if it is training, anything, we're there to support them, not to work as police or say, no, you cannot do that. That's not how we have created our security program at all.
And obviously in security, DevSecOps is a term, but this is very, very similar to DevOps in general, right? But just with a security flavor to that.
Exactly. I mean, just like you said, DevOps and DevSecOps, I don't see, you have this DevSecOps. I see that more as DevOps, and that in general is more like Dev. At least today, you own the full experience. Yes, you develop the code. Yes, you host it. Yes, you are responsible for security. Once again, the entire workflow.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to understanding your developer teams. And I feel like one of the core things, and this is a big culture change as well, because one of the core things between with I guess DevSecOps or security joining this is the security mentality and the developer mentality is quite different traditionally. And if we look at this slide, this is really the different viewpoints or the different contexts that each role persona brings to the table. And typically when there is, a developer looking at a problem or an auditor looking at a problem, the context is quite different. The developer understands the app. That's their happy place. That's their safe place. The auditor cares about risk and understands the risk. So when you're looking at a vulnerability or a potential architectural problem, they're coming at it from two very, very different points. One is understanding the flows through the app, the way the app is built, how it's deployed. The auditor cares about what type of vulnerability, where the data exists, what is the potential risk risk for the wider platform. They zoom out, and the developer cares obviously about much more than just the security, everything from performance to availability, etc., as well as obviously pushing those features out. Whereas the auditor, again, cares about risk across the application, risk across again, the data, potential breaches that could occur, ways in the weakest links, etc. So when we have these conversations, we need to be very, very conscious about that. And I think where we think about what the goals are for each of the roles, traditionally, the security audit mentality is about finding issues, logging the issues, and then passing over to a developer. A developer, when they find issues, their goal is to fix. They don't want to log things or anything like that. They want an easy path to fix. And this mentality difference is very crucial, because a security auditor trying to log a ticket and give that to a developer doesn't help a developer. A security auditor giving a solution to a developer or helping a developer to find that solution to fix is what a developer cares about. And of course, there are lots of kind of topics that a security team needs to learn about your development teams. Per, why don't you walk us through this and tell us which ones you find most core to understanding dev teams and how they work?
Our goal, of course, is to make it as easy as possible to work with security. So it's really important that we try to embed the security process into existing ones. So like the things that the developers are already comfortable working with, but also to stay up to date with, for example, new technologies. So if a majority of our teams will start to use .NET Core, well, then we in the security team still have to stay relevant, and that means that we also have to support that with the different expertise. So the security team, for example, will have to have tools that support those technology platforms, but also maybe read up or maybe even like hire new employees that have been working with those technologies. So we have first-hand experience with those technologies, so we can provide a good quality support, for example. But also, as you mentioned, with backlog, it makes no sense to have like security in its own backlog or own Jira project and things like that, because then it's not going to be transparent enough, and it's going to be forgotten and things like that. So try to use the thing that the developers already use, whether that is Jira, and use their own Jira project or GitHub issue or whatever you have. A bug is a bug. It doesn't matter if it is a security, performance, or other type of bug. And also, once again, when it comes to like pipeline and things like that, if the team have a pipeline, hook into that one. Don't try to create something new. And also here, there could be a lot of different solutions. So this is where it's very important for the vendors. So for example, in the case of Snyk, to be able to support a lot of different tools, tech stacks, and so on, and not only focus on a single one. So I see it more like as a full service and not as a tool. So we're not just throwing out a tool here, use Snyk. That's not how we work with security. Instead, like we try to make it a full offering. Like we take some cost for the tools. We provide first line support and education for the employees, like how will they use the tool and how they will use it most efficiently, and like tips and tricks and so on in their own context. Because let's be honest, we're working with the humans, and not all of them may be familiar with security tools or vulnerabilities or CLI tools and so on. And that's where we in the security team comes in. So, I mean, once again, it is really important to see that this part that we're working with humans, and there is a wide range of abilities when it comes to the tech, and we have to understand this and work with humans firstly and code secondly, not the other way around, which we normally may see it as.
Yeah, that familiarity is really core, and I think making sure you're your teams are not trying to learn something new, but actually you're fitting into their world rather than them trying to work in your world is really core, because dev teams have to work with so many other groups anyway. They don't want to have so many other practices. That is cool. And also,
yeah, just to add also that, I mean, the goal is not to make the developers security professionals. We have security professionals, just like it is not supposed to make all the developers experts in all areas. Like today we have full stack developers. There will always be like those expert areas, and some people will be experts in those areas. And I just see security just as another of those expert areas.
It's like we're essentially trying to make developers secure developers rather than security experts, which is, I think,
exactly.
There's a big difference between secure development and security, which is core. Also, the range of team abilities is a very interesting thing here. So obviously, every organization and company are going to have a variance between their high-performing teams, their low-performing teams, and probably a big group in the middle, which is, you know, their main style of development. And I think recognizing that, you know, intentionally recognizing that and making sure you do things differently across those teams is very, very important. You can't roll out a security program, you know, in exactly the same way across all teams and expect everyone to work correctly. And I think that's where like you say, you know, the different processes to work with how teams want to work, whether that's a CI environment or an IDE or something else, is core.
Hi, we are Eficode and we organize the DevOps Conference. We think that DevOps solves the conflict between security and the rate of innovation. If you are burdened by compliance, regulation, and red tape, we would love to talk and help you with your next steps. You can find us at eficode.com. The links are in the description, and have a great time with the DevOps Conference talks.
Okay, excellent. So you know, a lot of that empathy, as it were, for development teams is very core and important. So let's now start talking about some tips and tricks and ways in which we can empower developers to make them secure, as we were talking. I think one really important thing is to and this goes across a number of different topics that I've talked about, including security champions and pretty much anything you ask a developer to do. If it's not a core part of a developer's job, even if your development team want to do something, they're often going to be forced into either spending a very, very reduced amount of time on that, or likely not do it at all. If you give a developer almost like this would be nice to do in this sprint, it's unlikely to happen time and time again consistently. So one really, really important thing to do with security, as well as other backlog issues, we don't want to make security a special thing here, you know, other backlog issues, whether it's performance and other things, is to actually make sure it is either a part of a job, whereby I've heard lots of groups, I don't know if Visma do this, but lots of groups have, you know, a percentage time in their sprints, etc., dedicated to a technical debt or something like that. Now, one of the other areas that is important here is accountability, and the accountability here is about why developers do things. And one of the areas we're talking here isn't just the professionalism that a developer will say, I want to do this because I know it's the right thing to do. It's about, I want to do this because it's important to my business, it's important to my manager, and up that chain of reporting. So the accountability, while we see the ownership push down to the development and the developers and the actual individuals that are doing that work, it's important to understand that that accountability goes up in the sense that the developer needs to be held accountable by their team lead, by their manager, etc., and that goes all the way to the top to you know, an MD or a business unit, etc., all the way up to the CEO. To the extent that, you know, a CEO, if there's some security or other drop in numbers of vulnerabilities or skill levels or education, etc., there should be questions asked as to why is this team or department failing here when all my others aren't? What is the reason behind this, and what can we do about it? And this is where the accountability goes up. If the flow of accountability doesn't exist, then it will flow down the other way, that there's a message that this isn't important, that it doesn't need doing, because actually the developers and the teams are actually being pressured in other ways. And wherever you have your KPIs, wherever you have your pressures, that's ultimately the areas that your teams will spend most of their time. So accountability up is very, very important. Per, talk us through how some of the accountability works and some of the ways in which you do that at Visma.
Yes, so when it comes to accountability, just as you mentioned, it is really important that the team is responsible for the entire life cycle, and not only see it as, it is the developer's responsibility. Because when I was working as a developer, I always felt like a pride in the code that I wrote. Like, I don't want it to make insecure code or like bad performant code. But sometimes, yes, it did happen for various reasons. And those are kind of the reasons that we're trying to target here with a security program. If that is like lack of knowledge, if it is lack of accountability, if it is a management issue and things like that. That's the entire idea basically behind a security program, or at least the security program that we're trying to run. Yes, so to lift up all of these things here that we're talking about, we want to make security like super transparent and visible, because we understand, of course, as well that not all services or things can be equally treated. Like, teams comes from a different background, they have different tech stacks, and sometimes the security toolings isn't mature enough. And let's be honest, a internal service with no customer data, it can't be put into the same standards as a customer-facing service with a lot of customer data and sensitive data. Or it can, but it comes with a cost that most of the time wouldn't be justified. And this is kind of the issue that we have today. Like, where can we justify a good enough amount of time spent on security together with the other parts as well when it comes to development as well? So we're trying to be a little bit more pragmatic here and understand that. So this is actually a screenshot from one of our automations tool, where we have assigned all of our services into a tier like platinum or gold and things like that, based on the importance. And then we focus very heavily on automation to automate like policies and best practices, because let's be honest, very few people have actually read the policies or knows and keeps up to date to best practices. So we in the security team, we have tried to automate a lot of those things and basically flag for deviations for like not following policies and not following best practices. And here we try to roll out this one here in a slower pace. So first, like, are you using the security program at all and the things that we're offering, and then add like follow-up things and so on. So this is how we try to plot it out over time, and we continuously try to collect data from different services, and once again, to not have the developers going into this platform all the time. So we also focus heavily on notifications in Slack, for example. And this tool here, it serves multiple purposes, both for a developer, so they can actually drill down straight to the source tool with a single click. So they can see like, oh, this tool reports 100 security issues, but it's really only these 6 issues that the security team suggest us to prioritize and focus on. But for a manager, for example, it may not be useful to go that deep, but then instead it may be enough to like, oh, is it green or is it red, and see how it looks over time. And that's how we try to automate and be transparent with the security as well. And once again, we're also trying to do this for other fields as well. So our goal is to make security transparent for everyone in the company. So I know it can be like demotivating to know, like, oh, we have quite a long security backlog, and but knowing this, that we're not alone. This is how it looks like for the rest of us. It's not just green. There is some red, and we can see, this team that has a similar tool as us, they have the same issues as we do. So you can take a look at their security issues even, and even like talk to each other and help each other out. And once again, this is not only for security. So what we have done here is basically automated in the same way for security, just like we have done for other non-functional requirements, whether that is like performance or architecture and technology, different reviews and best practices, and good development and agile practices in general. Those are all automated here in this tool, and you can like flick between, like, okay, this is how it looks like in security, this is how it looks like for performance and things like that, and you can like, okay, this is a security sprint, this is a performance sprint, and things like that. So constantly trying to stay on your tier, basically.
And I absolutely love these, just for a number of reasons. But one to actually position security with other teams and goals of the business. So whether that's performance or something else, availability, etc. Because just because security might not be where you want it to be in certain areas, there might actually be much bigger problems somewhere else. So it actually gives a lot of context and helps with a lot of prioritization. I also think this is like
the full DevOps experience. Like, we don't want to isolate security, and that's why it was very crucial to have like several of those areas when we rolled out this tool. So this is not only for security; this is for DevOps, basically.
And making it a business as usual approach. I like that. This also acts very much on the developer to actually, because this is so visible and transparent. I see a lot of organizations, and in fact, a lot of the organizations I spoke to, the most successful organizations always had these style scorecards that were visible to up the chain, but also transparent across teams. So teams could actually very often see, okay, where are we sitting versus other teams? Where's our business unit sitting with other business units? Because there's an amount of gamification almost, which I know a lot of us always hate, but there is that natural gamification about not wanting to be the worst, or not wanting to improve something, actually for that to be visible by the organization. Equally, you don't, from a personal pride, you don't want to be the person that's getting flagged up. You don't want to be the person whereby your director, VP, or MD is having to come to you because these tests weren't done, or these issues weren't sorted under the SLA. So this visibility and transparency really gives a reason for developers to want to be better and want to adopt security and other functions a lot more. So
let's be honest, we're using this across all aspects of Visma. So we're even using this for sales, for example. Like when we have a customer wanting to buy any of our tools, we can set up a meeting with them and show, like, this is how it looks for the applications that you are wanting to buy. And yes, we do know that there are some security issues. We are aware of it, and this is our plan. But I mean, just showing that transparency toward a customer, it's so much better than like trying to fill out a 200 questions form. Like, are you doing this? Yes. But is it really true, or are you just answering yes? This is something that really sticks out from the competition, and this has landed us several deals, just having this transparency and not just showing that it is green, but also that it is red. So, I mean, normally like red is bad, but it's also honest.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's jump into automation, because you mentioned automation a couple of times, and obviously you have a lot of automation which is pulling this data. How important is automation, I guess, as part of the developer adoption, and where do you typically do that across the organization?
So when we try to introduce any tool, just like we did with Snyk, which is just one of the tools that we're offering from the security team, the implementation looks very similar. As I mentioned before, we try to embed it into existing tools and processes. But on top of that, we've also added even more automation, like the reporting tool that I showed before, but also self-service and things like that. We're not just throwing a tool at them, like here is a tool, use it, because we still want some structure and we want it to be as easy as possible to enroll. So the automation platform that we've built, it is just a single click, and then every automation is done, like team is created, permission is set, and things like that. So there is no need to send out a ticket or create a ticket and waiting a few days and things like that. Everything is done super quick, and we're talking about seconds to minutes before you have access to Snyk. You have signed on with single sign-on because Snyk already supported all of that automation, like a good API, single sign-on, so you don't have to go into more platform or the tools, native support for the different technologies and tech stacks that we have. So this is really, really important to have this native implementation. So from onboarding, like the single click, until we actually have data in the tool that we showed, we're talking about minutes to an hour. Which is astonishing to see, once you start to work with the tool, how fast you can get immediate feedback. And this is also how we were able to basically get 1,800 developers to use Snyk in about 8 months, I think it was. And this itself is pretty incredible. That's more like, 220 users per month, which is a large portion of our developers that we were able to get into Snyk. And this was because Snyk supported the automations that we basically needed. So we don't need all of those old manual processes before, and it also takes out user error and things like that. So that's how we are able to scale this very quickly. And once again, this is more as a service that we offer, not a tool. So we in the security team, we are also providing first line support. And not only we in the security team, I mean, we already have those 1,800 developers that are using Snyk today. Why not use them as the support as well? So we actually have a dedicated Slack channel where you have those developers, we have the security teams, and we have people from Snyk, and whoever is able to answer first and correct, of course, that is a very good experience for the end users. We don't have to send a ticket to Snyk. Most of the time, someone have done something similar before in Visma and can help instead.
Yeah, and I think one of the benefits of automation can equally sometimes be one of the downfalls, which is it's so easy and so fast to actually roll out. We sometimes miss the culture aspect here, right? And it's very often, if you're a developer team, it's really, really important to actually have the education and the awareness of what is happening alongside these more digital changes, adding something into a pipeline or adding something into a Git repo or whatever it is. So I presume there's a lot of education, a lot of awareness about what's changing, why it's changing, what they're going to see now, and how to deal with that as well. And as that rollout ramps up, perhaps some pipelines you might block, some pipelines you might not, some pipelines you might have different guardrails around. How important is that education around the automation as well?
I mean, the automation and knowledge about it is very crucial, but also the entire cultural aspect, being supportive and making sure that I mentioned, for example, that our developers, the other teams, are providing support for each other. I mean, that is a cultural thing and a management thing as well. They have to accept that we are here helping each other, and not only our small team, but basically the entire Visma. And also when it comes to like the security gate and things like that, that is also completely up to the developing team to implement the security gates that they want, that they see fit in their own context. We are not pushing any security gates or breaking builds or things like that from the security team. Once again, to not be a pain in the bottom for the developers. But if they want a security gate, if they want to break something, they can set it up. Of course, with our assistance, like maybe you shouldn't break on everything like a low issue. Maybe we should only break on critical issues, for example.
And that's a big part of the ownership as well. In order for a team like a development group to own an area, they need to actually be a part of the decision making. If they're not part of that decision making and part of that growth of a process, then they don't own it. They're adopting it essentially from, well, adopting perhaps in this context is a bad word, but they're effectively taking that process from another group, and that the ownership they feel on someone else's process, that's not always the best start. So let's stick with tools just initially, and I think this is our final piece here around tooling. And I think tooling is very, very important once you've got other things like your culture and everything that you talked about in the dynamic between the security in the development teams. It's very important that when you are providing tooling, you're actually providing developer tooling. You're not providing security tooling that kind of like is being retrofitted to a developer. You're providing a dev tooling that is self-serve, that has that a rich API or a CLI that Per was talking about, whereby you can add that automation, you can add those integrations across exactly into the places where you need. Nothing's always the same, so having that customizability, that ability to be able to run things as you wish is very, very important. And that community, being able to fall back on that community as needed, whether that's internal with Visma, the company, or the wider group of users outside. And then moving on to the platform scope, security has changed a lot. The development scope has changed a lot. Obviously, we're pulling in more things like containers, like cloud native artifacts, like Terraform scripts or Kubernetes config, these kind of things. When you think about security, don't think about it just as code, and think about it more traditionally as your DAST or SAST or IaaS, which is much more focused on the code that you write. Think about the actual deployment, and that includes the cloud native aspect of that. So everything from your, potentially your Docker containers, your Terraform scripts, your code formation artifacts, and those kind of things, as well as your SCA and SAST. Okay, and then finally the governance, which is something that we mentioned previously. Think about whether the tool is empowering your developers. Is it helping your developers do what they want to do, or is it dictating to developers? Is it giving them things, telling them the scale of the problem without empowering them to fix? So that's everything. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The empowering thing, I think that is probably one of the most important things. And understand, like, security, it's not so much about the tool, it's about the humans. And we're working with the humans, so that's why it's so important to empower the developers.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Okay, this is completes our session. So we're happy to take questions if there are any in the chat.
And yes, there are. Indeed, there are. But before we go to the questions, kudos on your ability to focus, Simon. You had one of the cutest excuses to get distracted in the background, and yet you kept your eye on the ball.
So that was my 2-year-old dog. We also have an 8-week-old puppy Labrador as well. So it is, I wasn't having enough distractions at home right now, so I needed a couple more dogs to bring in. Yeah.
Irrespective of the fact that the audience demands to be introduced to your dogs, we still need to take the question. The first question being, if you have a small 2 to 3 security expert team, how do you make the small centralized security team incentivized in streamlining the development process?
I mean, if you have those people that really, really cares about security, make sure that they are the ones that leading security and start small. I mean, the security program that we have created, it didn't happen overnight. So instead, start very small, start with a single tool and disable everything and just enable like a very, very small part of that tool and like create supporting documents and create hype about the tool. Like this tool can actually help you to solve this issue. Yes, it can also help you to solve a lot of other issues, but let's take that later on. So I mean, security is just a process, and it will take time. And I mean, we have the tool problem, we have the cultural problem, and like mindset and things like that. Simon,
I'd agree. I'd agree, and I would say the most important thing is to adjust the expectations of those who are asking, pushing this to happen. So if someone says this is what we need to roll out or this is what we need to change, you need to say, okay, this is the timeline, the roadmap that we want to do to actually change this. We're going to start maybe with a few teams that are super excited, actually want this to happen, and then there's a couple of things that we can do there. One is to actually celebrate the achievements, celebrate the wins, show the results, and then use that almost as kind of a little paved roadie to say, let's see how many people we can follow on. Make, as Per says, make those teams do the documentation, show how others can follow that. And I think, with Per's example of what was it, 1,800 devs being enrolled and adopting the tool in 8 months, that wasn't starting from scratch where a culture didn't exist, right? To build a culture from scratch and grow this into the organization from scratch takes many, many quarters, years to actually achieve. So there's once you have a great base, other things are easy to kind of like add on and roll out. So it's important to really make sure that timeline, expected timeline, is understood by many outside of the teams as well.
Cool. So that's basically setting a foundation is part of, I think, what you're saying. We had another question as well, which is why a separate security team instead of having security experts being part of the development team or educating developers regarding security?
I mean, that's kind of how we run the security program. We are just basically supporting the teams. We do have the expertise and so on, but technically I wouldn't say it is a separate security team because we are not the ones that fixing the issues. It's our developers and the management. They are the ones that taking the security decisions. Like they are the ones that approve things and so on. We're not getting like a stamp of approval from the security team. That's not how we work. We're more like the facilitators.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think there are some programs which are rolled out that can provide that. Security Champions was mentioned as one. And the idea of a Security Champions program is where you tend to have an individual on every single development team whose primary role is still a developer, but very often they have like 20% of their time or something like that dedicated to security functionality. They become certainly the go-to person within the team for expertise, somewhat expertise around secure development. They can then go to the security team, and very often things go through that individual, but they can then go to the security team where they need security expertise. To have security, and that's a really good bridge, by the way, because that bridge, effectively, you have someone who is more security savvy, but also really understands the architecture and the app and the services very, very well. The security team, now security is an interesting space because if you look at the sheer how hard it is right now to hire in security. It's an extremely hard space to scale anyway. So if you have 1,000 teams or 500 teams, to then have that number of security experts across the environment, it's right now an impossible task, certainly. But I think it works the way where you have developers who are creating security. You want security to go into developers and security to go into developer teams, and the way to do that is in my opinion, Security Champions, rather than have a single dedicated security person. It needs to be part of the security process.
And that's the only way we can scale security as well. So we also have a security engineer or security champion program. And without them, we wouldn't be able to scale security. And as we mentioned also previously, no, they may not be security experts, but they really care about security. They are interested in security. They have a passion for security, and that's kind of all that is required. And then we'll help them along the way with whatever they need.
We have one related question. We don't have time for the answer though, but if I post a question, then I hope you could stay online and just have chat with the people online in the chat. So let me just put the question, related question out there. Have you had experience with communities of practice with security as a domain? Is it effective, and any tips how to run it? And yes, this whole subject could entitle its own speech. So 3 seconds isn't enough to answer that. But now we have posed the question, and if possible, it would be really, really lovely to have a follow-up conversation in the chat. Thank you both for joining this wonderful session, and you have a lovely day.